Hi, my name's Gabby Logan. I'm a sports broadcaster, podcaster, and writer, and I'm here at Battersea Evolution today to help host a really exciting event, the Speaker's Corner. It's a collection of incredible and inspiring speakers, and that's the name of the event. I have hosted many sporting events over the last 30 years. I've been so lucky to be there when England won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. I've hosted many World Championships in athletics, Olympics, World Cups, but whenever I get asked the question, what's the one that sticks out the most, I have to say London 2012, because it was such a glorious time for this country, a halcyon summer, and then the Paralympics followed afterwards. I just got to enjoy the Paralympics on the sofa, but the Olympics I was really involved with, hosting a show every night and having a background as a gymnast. I am an Olympics nut, and I remember the first Olympics I watched at the age of 11, watching the 1984 Olympics and wanting to be an Olympian. So that summer was probably one of the most glorious periods of my working life. When I started out in the industry, back in the 90s, there weren't many women hosting sport. There weren't many women actually doing sport on TV. So I think what's happened in the last 30 years is pretty amazing. Not only now do we have loads more women presenting sport in front of the camera, but a lot more women's sport is on TV, which is really important, and women working behind the camera as well. We've gone from the days where I could be in an office full of 40, 50 men with one or two women in, to often I look around and there's a 50-50 split. In fact, the 2022 Euros, where the Lionesses beat Germany in the final, the company that produced that for the BBC, Whisper, they had a 50-50 split male-female across all the production. So it's really important to me that we see more women in high-profile roles, but also in those roles that you don't see in front of the camera, making the decisions as well. Because sport is actually a microcosm of life in many ways, and sport has the ability to cut through difficult subjects and get people talking. And I think if it was only a male space, it wouldn't be very representative of the world that we live in. I read quite a depressing statistic today that in terms of gender parity globally, we're going to be looking at 2158 before men and women have parity with their salaries globally. That's a long time to wait, isn't it? And I think we are getting there in sport in terms of the coverage. We're getting there in sport in terms of seeing the first €1 million footballer this year. Naomi Girma signed for Chelsea. But there's a long way to go. You know, when it comes to the Olympic Games, you have pretty much a 50-50 in terms of the coverage, because we've accepted for a long time that Olympic sport is male and female. But I think the dominant sports globally, you look at rugby, football, cricket, have still got a male bias in terms of the amount that is shown men's sport compared to women's sport. So we've got a way to go, but we're getting there. And there's obviously a huge participation increase in football. Post Euros, we've seen better coverage of women's football, and that's really important, I think, to lead the way for other sports. But I think it could be a few decades yet before we see parity. I love presenting sport, but the thing about sport is it often happens in everybody's downtime. So I don't have any control about when a World Cup final is, for example. I work a lot of weekends. The beautiful thing about podcasting is that I can fit that into the rest of my life, and I have a bit more control about when I do it. And I started it out as a bit of a passion project because I was in my late 40s, approaching midlife, thinking, what does this mean? What kind of changes am I going to experience? How am I going to approach the rest of my life? And so it was really self-serving. I wanted to speak to other midlife people and find out the tools to navigate that journey. And then it just grew and grew. And now for the last 5 years, I've been hosting The Midpoint and had on an amazing range of guests, from comedians to actresses to civil rights campaigners to sports people who share their stories. And alongside that, there's been a growing conversation about the menopause and how women obviously have huge health challenges in that period of life. And that's come out from a lot of my female guests as well. So I've really enjoyed having something that I can control, as opposed to sport, which I have to go to the stadium when it's happening. I can't tell Manchester United when to play a game. So as much as I never want to stop doing the sport, I love having a podcast to create and to be more in control of, I think. I'm really looking forward at the Inspiring Stories event to be inspired by the people who are talking here tonight. I've not heard any of them speak before. I've met a couple of them along the way, or one or two anyway. So I'm looking forward to hearing their stories, and I'm looking forward to seeing the reaction from the room as well, because the people in the room tonight are all people who will be putting on big events, and it's interesting to see what resonates with them, because when you go to an event, normally you're speaking to the people that they are serving, the company, and if you're at a dinner, obviously people are having a drink, they're not always listening. So tonight I imagine everybody in that room will be quite attentive to what's going on. So it'll be high pressure out there, I think, to make sure everybody performs, but I think it's going to be a really great collection of very different speakers.